Hi, my name is Jay Reed. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. And today I'd like to talk about the feeling that you owe the narcissistic parent and erasing that debt. So I'd like to talk about how one can come to the belief that one is in debt to or owes a narcissistic parent, and how to combat this pillar assumption in the relationship with them. I think there are real important reasons why this feeling comes about, and the goal with today is to sort of hopefully elucidate some of those reasons, and then and then offer some tactics for catching that and working to challenge it within oneself and in other relationships. So just to quickly review the psychology of the narcissistic parent, they can start with a core sense of worthlessness that can feel unbearable to them, but that problem is addressed by artificially inflating their sense of self-worth in a very unrealistic and grandiose way. So in essence, it's saying, I feel terrible, but then it's like using denial. No, I don't. I'm the best. And it's a fragile solution, sort of clearly, given its sort of brute force aspects to it. And so one thing that's kind of used to try to bulwark it is to grow a sense of entitlement that others comply with this artificially inflated sense of themselves. And it's coupled with a lack of empathy and remorse for the costs that it might entail in those around them. In essence, a lack of empathy and being able to know and care about the feelings of others around them, even those they are in close relationship with. So with that in hand, if you think of a narcissistic parent within a family system, it can often create a system that becomes enmeshed. And an enmeshed family system is a closed system where members are expected to display supreme loyalty to the family, and healthy efforts to individuate and find sources of happiness in their own lives are typically treated as acts of disloyalty deserving punishment. And one of the gravest threats for the child in such a situation is to be exiled if they dare transgress by, in essence, living according to their own dictates and not orienting themselves constantly around and to the family, which often the family is sort of an extension of the narcissistic parent's preferences, what ideas, those rites and rituals discussed in other videos. Just doing everything that's aligned with that narcissistic parent often becomes what the family really means. And there's often a felt fragility in the fabric of the enmeshed family, where all members sort of know that a tightrope must be walked, or sort of everything could fall apart. And that might happen in the form of the narcissistic parent having bouts of rages, accusing one member of failing to do their duty, or acting selfishly, and so forth. So disaster can often feel like it's constantly looming, but the family has to act as though everything's sort of normal and we're all going on being with our lives, despite what's sort of in the shadows there. And another kind of feature of what can happen in an enmeshed family is that the survivor can sort of feel that their experience is only valid, matters, or is useful when one's in interaction with the family. Folks have talked about feeling like life was dim when not in immediate connection to the enmeshed family, and the lights were on when in direct interaction with the family. And that, I think, reflects the relationship dynamics with the narcissistic parent, where the only sort of thing that counts is when the child is doing something that reflects back on the parent. And if the child's doing something on their own, and like you think of this as the parent with the light emitting from them, it's not a clean light. It's a bad light, but nonetheless, it's light for the child. If the child's out here doing their thing, then they're sort of out of it. And typically, with a good enough parent, the parent's tracking the child, and actually the child's tracking the parent, but because they want to, not because they feel compelled to. So the light might dim just a bit, but it's always in easy reach, for both parties. Folks are free to come and go and know that the connection is strong. That's not the case in the enmeshed family. It has to be repeatedly renewed, moment to moment, day to day, and so forth, or else. And that's much like I think the narcissistic individual's own sense of self-worth. By virtue of that brute force solution of, no, I'm not worthless, I'm super worth it, in sort of an artificial way, it's got to constantly be renewed. So in some ways, this enmeshed family becomes a reflection of that solution to the narcissistic parent's own, very fragile sense of self-worth within. And I think often survivors of an enmeshed family headed by a narcissistic parent had to learn to internalize and relate to the narcissistic parent within themselves, rather than internalizing a sense of oneself in relation to others. So when the survivor may, having had to go through this, it may only see other people when they look within themselves, because this was exactly what was necessary to do to get through the enmeshed family system. On top of that, if you're sort of, I think, born with higher sort of capacity for empathy, this solution can come very readily. And, to internalize the others in the family really helps the survivor at the time do what was expected of them, to put the needs of others way ahead of their own. And so it motivates the child, I think, to kind of see and meet the needs of others, because it sort of feels like they're doing it for themselves because they sort of feel that from within, by virtue of internalizing the others, particularly the narcissistic parent. It also, on the flip side, serves as I think it's sort of like the third rail on the subway system. You don't want to touch it, because once the narcissistic parent is internalized, then when they grow contemptuous or hostile, the child can, contemptuous or hostile for not, complying with their sense of entitlement, that everything revolves, say, around the narcissistic parent in that particular moment, whatever's entailed in that. And so, it's often a matter of when, not if, that narcissistic parent grows contemptuous and hostile towards the person who failed to comply with their sense of entitlement. And when that happens, it can feel searing, I think, to the child, because in a way there's no conscious sense of self in relation to the parent. It's just the parent within sort of ravishing the child with their hostility and contempt. So it sort of it ups the ante, or sort of increases the child's motivation to keep the parent happy, because in a real way, it's like, if I keep the parent happy, I protect myself from within. So it's I think a known experience by many people who've had to go through this, but and it's insidious, because it, by virtue of this closeness and what's required of it, it affords such little protection from inflammations of hostility that can erupt from the narcissistic parent. So some of the kind of psychological residue of coming out of an enmeshed family system is that when one tries to sort of be on their own, say in reference to last week's video, in trying to achieve, say, a state of flow, in relating to oneself, it can feel very sort of dark, as though one's in that darkness I mentioned earlier, because I think that darkness sort of reflects the sense of feeling unloved, unknown, estranged, even in extreme circumstances, undeserving of existing, if not in connection to the enmeshed family. And I'm explaining all this about in the enmeshed family and what it feels like for the survivor, when in connection with them, by having internalized the parent, and also then what it's like when they're out of connection, and this kind of dysphoria and sense of estrangement that can ensue, to kind of set the stage for explaining why it can often feel like one is in debt or owes the narcissistic parent. I think that goes hand in hand with this kind of enmeshed kind of system that can get imposed by the narcissistic parent. What was necessary to survive that was to orient themselves in a way that protected the survivor from the accusation of disloyalty by the narcissistic parent if they were to detect that child wasn't devoting enough of his or her existence to the family, but likely meaning to that parent. And so that feeling that you sort of in constant, what is it that you owe to the parent helps to protect from the terrible sense of guilt and sort of even exile that can happen when under attack by the narcissistic parent for not caring about the family, which again is that guise for caring enough about them. So, another dilemma. It seems like these dilemmas are, I talk about them a lot, it seems video after video, because really that's what I think the situation at the time the child is in. It's no win. You go one way and it's not going to work out, same with the other. If the child pursues his or her own development and happiness in their own lives, they're then met with the claim they're being disloyal and abandoning to the very same people that they're actually programmed to want and need to be cheering for them as they pursue their own happiness and development. And so the ways this might show up in sort of life after childhood is feeling like there's always something else someone should be doing when they're engaged in an activity, or that one can't feel okay about doing anything unless it's on behalf of someone else, or say for one's job, or feeling like it's again a matter of when, not if, someone says, hey, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, making it very hard to sort of rest easy. And then again, back to that other part about sort of it feeling like the lights grow dim when kind of living on one's own or doing for oneself, that can also kind of be present as one kind of comes out of this way of being brought up. But once enough distance has been accrued between, I think, the enmeshed family system headed by a narcissistic parent, it can become possible to work through the feelings of abandonment and guilt, or sort of danger signals that used to accompany or had to accompany paying attention to oneself, and in effect working to erase this pseudo debt they had to believe they owed the family and really the narcissistic parent. I think one way this can be done, and often I think is a critical way to do this, is to accrue different experiences in relationship with people whom are indeed safe. And by safe, I mean they're not narcissistic, they have good capacity for empathy, they're interested in you and curious about you, and express themselves, share who they are, and are safe people to talk about one's own vulnerabilities, but also share their own, and are trustworthy. There's some other features too. That'll be for another video at some point. But anyway, with someone who's safe, one gets to over time learn that caring for oneself doesn't come at the expense of caring about others, nor do others take it that way, these safe others. And that's just, I think, such a critical experience to be had frankly, over and over and over again, to kind of deprogram the opposite lesson that had to be learned and lived coming out of this system, and continually plied with these new safe people, so that new programming gets to emerge, new expectations get to emerge. I think, in essence, what one gets to know when they, moving out of the enmeshed family system and towards relationships with safe people, is that what used to be the dilemma is now a win-win. one gets to connect to oneself, feel and know and express oneself in the original ways that reflect who one really is. And doing so actually adds to the sense of connection from these other safe people. Where before it was one or the other, now it gets to be both and, as they say. So I think in a way that's really kind of good news of what can lie in wait for the survivor of this type of really awful dilemma. That there is a win-win ahead. Again, it's incremental. The progress towards that's incremental, and it's not going to feel that way in one fell swoop for sure. But I strongly believe, lies out there. Well, thanks for tuning in again this week. It's been really such a pleasure to share these thoughts each week on this video channel, and it really means a tremendous amount to me to read the comments and to know that it's been useful to many of you. So I wish everyone well, and I look forward to posting again next week, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care.